Let's unpack this. Welcome to our deep dive.
Okay.
We sift through sources to bring you the really key insights.
And today we're looking at Aconite Napellus. You probably know it as monk's hood.
Yeah, and our guide for this journey is William Boericke's Homeopathic Materia Medica. We're using excerpts from that classic text. Our goal, basically, to pull out the absolute essence, the main characteristics, the crucial bits, and maybe some of those really specific, almost strange details Boericke uses to describe Aconitum in his work.
Right. Think of it as like a concentrated look at what this specific source says about it.
Mhm.
It helps you get a quick handle on Boericke's view. And he starts right off with the core state, the real heart of Aconitum, according to him.
Which is?
Well, it's this profound fear and anxiety, like a deep anguish, he says, of both mind and body, plus this constant restlessness, physically and mentally.
And Boericke flags that right away, doesn't he? He says that's the most characteristic thing. It's sort of the foundation for everything else he describes.
Exactly. And he links it very strongly to how symptoms start this sudden, really acute, sometimes violent onset, especially with the fevers. If something hits hard and fast, he's saying, think aconitum.
Like a switch flips. Very sudden. And he connects it to the environment too, right? Exposure to dry, cold weather or drafts.
Yes, dry cold is a big one he mentions,
Yeah.
often leading to checked perspiration. But interestingly, he also brings up problems from very hot weather. Seems to be particularly gut issues in that case.
So it's not just cold, but maybe the shock of extremes or sudden changes. That seems to be the trigger in this view.
That seems to be the idea, yeah. The sudden exposure setting off this intense acute reaction. Now, here's a really important concept from Boericke. He talks about aconitum causing only functional disturbance.
Okay, functional disturbance. Let's unpack that a little. What does he mean by that, and why is it so significant in his description?
Well, he puts it quite plainly.
Yeah.
There's no evidence, he says, that it actually produces tissue change. Like established inflammation or damage. He describes its action as brief. And crucially, it shows no periodicity. It doesn't have that regular rhythm you see in some conditions.
Yeah.
So this really pins down its sphere of action, according to Boericke.
Where exactly?
Right at the beginning of an acute illness. He talked about the initial hyperemia, that first rush of blood or congestion. But before you get exudation, like fluid leakage or actual pathological changes in the tissue.
Got it. So understanding that difference, functional disturbance versus actual tissue change, that's crucial for knowing when Boericke thinks aconitum fits the bill. It's for that very first initial intense reaction.
Precisely. It's like the body's immediate high alert alarm going off.
Yeah.
And Boericke also emphasizes this feeling of tension running through many symptoms. He means both physical, like arterial tension, and also emotional or mental tension.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're in that state of alarm, fear, restlessness, tension seems almost inevitable, right?
Absolutely.
And that leads us right into the mental state he describes, which is, well, it's incredibly intense. Boericke says this great fear and anxiety comes with every single ailment. Doesn't matter how small it seems.
Yeah, it's not just for the big scary stuff. And this is where his description gets really, really specific, almost dramatic, you could say. He details that the person fears death.
Okay. Fear of death. Common enough, maybe.
But wait, there's more. He says they believe they will soon die, and this is the really striking part. They sometimes even predict the day.
Predict the day. Wow, okay, that's a powerful detail. It really paints a picture of how intense and specific this fear state is, as Boericke sees it. It's not just nerves, it's a conviction.
It really is. And he lists other specific fears too. Fear of the future, fear of crowds, even fear of crossing the street. And physically, well, it matches the mental state.
Yeah.
Constant restlessness, tossing and turning, easily startled.
The mind driving the body? Makes sense. But then he adds some surprising mental details too, doesn't he? Things like acute imagination, even clairvoyance is mentioned.
Yeah, those are in there. And the description of pain is telling. Pains are intolerable. They drive him crazy.
Drive him crazy. Again, that intensity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Music becomes unbearable, makes the person sad. And then there's those really odd thoughts. Boericke notes, like thinking your thoughts are coming from your stomach or feeling like parts of your body are abnormally thick.
Or that feeling that something that just happened was actually a dream.
Right. Those kinds of almost surreal perceptions.
These details definitely go beyond just fear and restlessness. They add these layers of like perceptual weirdness, according to Boericke, makes the picture really stand out. Okay, so let's look at how this core state shows up physically, drawing on Boericke's descriptions.
Okay, starting with the head. He talks about fullness, heaviness, a pulsating feeling, and a hot bursting sensation.
And that imagery again. A burning headache as if the brain were moved by boiling water. Intense. Vertigo too, right? Worse when getting up.
Yes. Vertigo worse on rising and when shaking the head. And there's that peculiar sensation he mentions on the top of the head, the vertex, as if the hair were being pulled.
Strange. Okay, moving down to the face. Boericke gives that classic picture.
One cheek red, the other pale.
That's such a specific visual, and he adds that detail that when the person stands up, the red face suddenly becomes deathly pale, often with dizziness.
There's also tingling and numbness mentioned in the face. And he specifically points out neuralgia, nerve pain, especially on the left side. And he often connects that back to the general restlessness and tingling.
Okay, throat and mouth.
Described as red, dry, constricted. There can be numbness, prickling, burning sensations. The mouth itself feels numb, dry, and tingly.
And for the tongue, he mentions the tips specifically tingling. Gums can be hot, inflamed.
Right. Then the stomach. Vomiting, he notes, is often accompanied by fear.
There's that fear again.
And the thirst is interesting. He says intense thirst, but describes this very specific pattern. The person drinks eagerly, but then vomits, and then declares they're going to die.
Wow, okay. That single description ties together the thirst, the vomiting, and the characteristic fear state. That's Boericke being very concise there. Taste is often bitter, he says, except for water.
Moving to the urinary system. Urine is scanty, red hot, painful. There might be retention where the person can't urinate and they're screaming, restless, maybe handling the genitals. And significantly, anxiety always on beginning to urinate.
See, there's that anxiety weaving through everything again. Even a basic function like urinating shows how linked the mind and body are in this picture.
Absolutely. Then respiratory system. We get a hoarse, dry, croupy cough. Breathing can be loud, labored. And that really memorable image of a child who grasps at their throat with every cough.
Oh, that's vivid. And the cough is worse when...
Worse at night, he says, and especially after midnight. Breathing feels tight, oppressed, even on the slightest movement.
Okay.
And the heart. He notes tachycardia, fast heart rate. And palpitations, that feeling of the heart pounding again with anxiety, sometimes fainting. And that tingling shows up again, this time in the fingers.
And the pulse itself.
Described as full, hard, tense, and bounding, very strong. And there can be pain in the left shoulder, which often signals heart involvement in these older texts.
Right. Lastly, the extremities, arms, and legs.
Yeah, we see that numbness and tingling theme again frequently. Sometimes icy coldness, loss of sensation in hands and feet. But Boericke also notes the opposite picture sometimes. Hot hands and cold feet.
Interesting contrast.
And pain down the left arm can occur. Plus, a really unique visual detail. Bright red hypothenar eminences. That's the fleshy pad on the palm below the little finger. Bright red on both hands.
Those really specific, sometimes unusual physical signs like the red cheek, pale cheek, or the red palms, they really help make Boericke's picture distinct, don't they? They anchor it.
They absolutely do. So, okay, let's pull this together. Boericke emphasizes again the context. Aconitum is for acute early stages.
And he's equally clear about when it's not the remedy, right? Like for malarial fevers or those low-grade fevers.
Exactly. Not for malarial or what he calls low fevers. Not for hectic or PM-ic conditions. Those usually involve more chronic wasting or pus, and not once the inflammation has settled in, localized, and gone beyond that initial functional disturbance.
Got it. He also talks about relationships with other things.
Yeah, he mentions vinegar as an antidote, presumably for poisoning from the raw plant. Says acids, wine, coffee can modify its action, and he compares it to things like chamomile and coffee, especially regarding intense pain or sleeplessness.
And wasn't there something about sulfur?
Yes. He notes sulfur often follows aconitum well. He even calls it a chronic aconite, suggesting sulfur might address deeper underlying issues after aconitum handles the acute flare-up.
Interesting connection. Did he mention other types of aconitum?
Briefly, he touches on aconitum ferox, saying it's more violent, more diuretic, less for fever, but specifically mentions it for cardiac dyspnea trouble, breathing from heart problems, and anxiety with suffocation. And aconitine, the chemical itself, he notes, specifically for causing tingling.
Okay. And finally, any guidance on dosage in this source?
He gives a range. The 6th potency for sensory issues, 1st to 3rd for congestion, the tincture for neuralgia, though he has a warning, it's poisonous, or even the 30th potency, depending on the person's sensitivity.
Right. So we've really dug into Boericke's description of aconitum here. We've seen that signature profile, the sudden onset, the intense fear and restlessness, and that specific idea of an acute functional disturbance often linked to exposure.
Yeah, and the picture he paints is just so vivid, isn't it? Almost dramatic, with details like predicting death or the boiling water sensation in the head. It creates a very clear, though quite intense image.
So, boiling it down, what's the takeaway from Boericke? This source seems to present a commodum as the remedy for when you're suddenly hit by an overwhelming crisis, feeling like you're in imminent danger. And this manifests intensely, mentally and physically, but crucially, before deep tissue changes set in.
That sums it up nicely based on this text.
Okay, so thinking about everything we've just explored from Boericke, like constant drumbeat of fear, anxiety, restlessness, the underlying tension he mentions, and how anxiety pops up even with urination or palpitations. Here's something to mull over.
Given how tightly Boericke weaves together these emotional states like fear and anxiety with physical sensations like tension, a racing heart, restlessness, how does this particular source really suggest that the emotional and the physical are fundamentally inseparable in the Aconite picture? And how might looking at symptoms through that specific lens, one Boericke provides here, influence how you understand this remedy, or maybe even how you think about symptoms more broadly?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.